All right, let's get in our two voices on the broadcast. Daniel Silverberg, who is representing the DC voice, essentially. He's an adjunct fellow at CNAS, a prominent think tank in Washington, D.C. Anjali Prasad, who is India's former permanent representative to the WTO as well. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me. And you know, Daniel, let me start with you in terms of the DC voice, so to say. How do you see the big X factor through this announcement? It's been in the pipeline for a fairly long time. The deal finally went through. We're still waiting for the fine print, but you've been able to digest, decode, dissect some of that. What, according to you, stands out as that big X factor in this trade announcement?
First, thank you for having me. It's not to be taken for granted that a deal like this got done. My number one takeaway is that there is momentum to put the U.S.-India relationship back on track, which is what so many observers, investors, government leaders have wanted for months now. And unfortunately, I think the relationship got a little too personalized over the last few months, and that became a problem for U.S.-India relations. I'm pleased to see that we're in essence getting back on track. For me, the biggest X factor was the Russia oil sanctions. No question. That's a pretty significant step.
Anjali, Prasad, ma'am, you want to come in there in terms of your assessment of what Daniel is saying and the X factor in this trade announcement?
Well, first of all, I want to say that we don't really know the fine print yet. It is shrouded in mystery. What we have are the announcements coming from Washington. We don't know the fine print. We know some broad things, that our agri sector has been opened up, that we would have to buy $500 billion worth of goods from the United States, that we would have to buy oil from
On
Venezuela.
the agri front, the government has clarified that interests of farmers will be protected. But go ahead, ma'am, finish your point.
Yeah. Well, I don't buy into that. I'm sorry. What is my assessment is that it will be a slow and poisonous pill. It is always done in that manner. When you fear a public backlash, if you put out everything together, then you don't come out with all the details to start with.
Okay, so you're essentially questioning the fact that more details need to be out. I think that joint statement will come out shortly. Yeah.
I am questioning the statement made that the agriculture sector has been kept out of this deal. I'm questioning that.
Okay.
And I am also stating that we don't know the fine print.
Okay, we await the fine print, and that is when we'll be able to clearly assess where things stand. Daniel, I want to now bring the other part. You mentioned the Russian oil bit right at the beginning of this discussion. As far as the Russian oil part is, India has been more circumspect than what the Trump administration's announcement has been with regards to Russian oil, because we are quite clear that we import 88% of our energy needs, and we've got to keep that in mind for any trade relationship. Your thoughts?
What I took from that announcement was a very clear statement of intent, at least by U.S. negotiators, for India to lower its dependence on Russian oil. Right now, from what I understand, India imports more than a third of its oil from Russia. And it makes sense why it does so. It's extraordinarily cheap. But there's geopolitical costs to that. And I think the Trump administration, along with a pretty strong bipartisan support in Congress, have been trying to end that. You saw bills introduced just this past December and January without naming India or any other country, but bills sanctioning countries that continue to purchase Russian crude. And so unlike so many other issues in Washington, where there's a deep divide among Republicans and Democrats, and even among Republicans and Democrats in the Trump administration, on this issue, I actually think that there's a healthy degree of consensus that American leaders do not want India or other countries buying significant amounts of Russian oil, no matter how cheap it is. Now, if
So
I
the
were the
Russian-
Indians, I would understand why they are not eager to come out and perhaps announce a commitment to that, because it's unclear how will they meet U.S. expectations to reduce their dependence on Russian
There are
oil.
US expectations, there are also Indian energy requirements, and also at the same time, one needs to find out details with regard to the big numbers that have been put in place. $500 billion is what the first message that came out, the first announcement that came out said. For a relationship, for a trade partnership, that's actually about $135 billion. Anjali, Prasad, your thoughts on the Russian oil aspect for India?
See, I feel President Trump, of course, has announced that Russian oil imports will cease once the US trade deal comes into force. However, this is certainly not in national interest, clearly. You can see, it is obvious, all the way from Venezuela, if we were to import oil, it would be far more expensive than if we import from somewhere nearby, like Russia or Iran or any of these countries that we were importing oil from. We are being literally arm twisted if this is going to be the fine print of the deal. First, President Trump literally annexes Venezuela, and now he forces India to buy its oil for US interests. How good is this? Or how beneficial is this for India?
I think that's why India has been very circumspect. Even the announcement that came out from the Indian side didn't have any of those specific mentions that Donald Trump's announcement made. And I think that's where that distinction needs to be highlighted. Final question, Daniel, to you. You know, trade talks are give and take. It's not just about whatever Donald Trump wants or whatever America wants. India agrees to all of it. In terms of give and take, India is also looking at some big wins from here as well. What are that, in your assessment, what could those be?
What does India get from this? Well, I think having the U.S.-India relationship put back on track is a huge win for both sides. I also think that India will hopefully benefit from a Russia that is no longer threatening its neighbors, that is not an international pariah as it is right now, and that is creating global havoc. And frankly, in the US, even for staunch supporters of the US-India relationship, it's been a little bit of a tough pill to swallow to see India taking advantage of cheap Russian crude at the exact moment when the US and European allies have been working so hard to try and end the bloodshed in Ukraine.
All right. The new economic world order is taking shape, India being a very important stakeholder in that. I'm going to leave it there. Anjali, Prasad, Daniel Silverberg, thanks so much for speaking to me on India Ascents.